Now that we've looked at Theravada Buddhism and Hinayana Buddhism, we're going to switch and look at the traditions of Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism, you may remember, is primarily the Buddhism that emerges in the northern part of Asia, in China, Japan, and Tibet. It's more Central Asia, but relative to the other sections, it's a little further north. The most important thing about Mahayana Buddhism to remember is it's while it means the great raft or the large vehicle, it really is encompassing a huge range of traditions that don't really fall under a particular umbrella of qualities. Now, you may remember early on in the video before last, I was comparing Hinayana and Mahayana. And if you look at Mahayana, generally speaking, there's more of a sense of community. There's more of a prayer aspect as opposed to a mindfulness aspect in many areas of Mahayana traditions. And the emphasis on heart-based practice as opposed to mindful-based practice or intellectually-based practice. Buddhism is pretty heady as a religion, and Mahayana gets more into some of the more emotional or intuitive ways of understanding the Dharma. The other piece of this, you'll see there's going to be we're going to look at Tibetan Buddhism, which has certainly a monastic or a monk focus. So does Zen Buddhism. But when we look at certain other aspects like Pure Land, we're going to see practices that are way more geared towards everyday people that don't want to go off into monasteries to practice their religion. So this idea of the Buddha as a savior and God will make sense in some ways and not make sense in others. So my point is that this only partially applies to aspects of Buddhism in this area. So we're going to talk about how Buddhism comes to China. I'm going to come back to this when we get to Zen Buddhism because Bodhidharma has a huge role to play in this. So what's important to understand here is that one of the earliest forms of Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism, develops fairly early on. And this is kind of a reaction against traditional Buddhism. It gets rid of the emphasis on Buddha as a person and on his teachings and on meditation and the Eightfold Path. And it focuses more on the Buddha as a cosmic figure or as a figure that you can pray to. So as you'll see, Pure Land Buddhism is going to become very central to Chinese culture early on as it begins to develop. And if you look at the map here, you'll notice that Buddhism is sort of infused through the central part of China and in almost all areas of it. And it overlaps with some of the folk traditions in China. So what's interesting about religions as they come into other countries is they tend to adopt some of the qualities of those cultures. And you'll see this a little bit in Pure Land Buddhism in interesting ways. So Pure Land Buddhism is almost a completely different religion from Theravada Buddhism. If you see Pure Land temples, they tend to be highly ornate with lots of bold colors. And the other thing about Pure Land Buddhism is it's not going to be based so much on meditation, but more on chanting and prayer. So you'll hear this song sung over and over again in different forms to the Amitabha Buddha. Now, the Amitabha Buddha is difficult to define. It's basically the sense of almost like a symbolic Buddha that exists celestially. It's not necessarily Siddhartha. It's more this idea of the infinite light and infinite life and infinite wisdom that the Buddha represented. So the essential practice in Pure Land Buddhism is the chanting of this name, Amitabha Buddha, with total concentration. And the idea is you're focusing on sort of this celestial Buddha, and you're trusting that you're going to be reborn into the Pure Land. So Pure Land Buddhism is literally referring to this concept of Sukhavati. And Sukhavati is the Pure Land idea of what we might call heaven or another world that we're praying to enter into through this chanting. So I'm going to play a little bit for you and see if this will come through. So this is the Namo Amitabha, and you'll notice that this is 12 hours of this. So if you get into a taxi cab in certain parts of China, or you're even in a house, this is the kind of thing that will be playing in the background, perhaps. It also will be the thing that devout Buddhists in China will chant. So this is much more musical and involves a kind of devotional aspect. We're not going to listen to 12 hours of that. Here's another example of children chanting in Vietnam, the same song essentially. It's going to sound a little bit different. So this is a combination of a prayer and a song and a devotional practice that all comes together in ways that are very, very important. So let me see if I can get this back into the frame. Might take me a minute. There we go. All right, we got refocused. That's a good thing. Nothing like low production value in the middle of a screencast. Okay. Now, Pure Land Buddhism also has highly ornate Buddhas. You'll never see this in Theravada Buddhism, these highly worshipped Buddhas. And you'll see there's more than one here, and they're different Buddhas. So Pure Land Buddhism is really kind of like all these Buddhas that are brought together in different forms of, they might express different aspects of the internal state, or different heavenly presences, or different bodhisattvas. Even a bodhisattva is a fully realized being, so other Buddhas as well. And you might also notice that in the center of the chest of the central figure is a swastika. And if you remember from Hinduism, the swastika is a symbol of perfection. Is not what we associate with in the way that we associate it with Hitler, who perverted it. But the point is, it speaks to kind of spiritual perfection. And you can see also the candles here. There's a lot more ritual, sacrifice, and ceremony around the Buddhas in ways that you just don't see in other traditions. So as we said before, the Amitabha Buddha is both a savior, and also these practices tend to be done with groups of people. So you can pray to the spirits of ancestors. You can pray for good luck, more along the lines of the way one might pray to God in the Western traditions. So to give you another example of this, move this back over. You can see here monks leading a prayer ceremony to dead ancestors. So this is a family praying to a deceased, probably grandfather or grandmother, and you can see the prayer happening. The incense being offered. Okay, what you might notice here is the fact that, got to get this centered again. High technological production quality here. What you notice is there is a female monk there. This is more inclusive, and it is more about the experience of lay people, meaning everyday people. So you'll see this in all over China, and also the emphasis not only on ornate Buddhas, but also really, really big ones. So here's the Tian Tin Buddha in Hong Kong from the Pure Land tradition, not highly ornate, but absolutely enormous. This Buddha, I believe, is almost 100 feet high, sits up in the mountains. It's a place that people go to worship and to sing and to pray to. See it again here. Here it is in China, the Grand Buddha at Lingshan. And again, huge Buddha that is completely different from the Buddhas that you're going to see in places like Sri Lanka or in Thailand. So moving on, again, you can see that the temple in Vietnam looks a lot like the one in China, with the highly illuminated temples and the lights, the lines of people. It's more organized, it's more communal. And of course, what they're praying to, what they're worshiping in part is this Sukhavati, which I mentioned earlier. And so for them, Sukhavati is not as literal a place as the heaven that you might be more familiar with if you are a Christian. It's more this idea of a paradise where you can go where there are no distractions. It's a place where you can continue doing the things that you might not have had time to do while you were alive to work towards your liberation under the most favorable conditions. And as you can see here again, multiple Buddhas and enlightened beings that are presiding over this and kind of giving you direction as you head off in this final stage after you die of trying to reach a more permanent state of enlightenment. So the sutras for the dead, there will be all kinds of different songs for different traditions. And there again, you can see the sacrifices, the food that's being offered there. So this has a little bit of a taste of Hinduism in it as well. It's not polytheistic, but it has different forms of God and sacrifices and rituals. And it's going to be very much rooted in Chinese culture. So alongside of Pure Land Buddhism, we'll see these things. Obviously, it's the devotional path. A Theravadan Buddhist would say, well, this really isn't Buddhism at all. This is something quite different. And I'm not sure who gets to define what the religion is, but certainly the Chinese would say there are advantages to this type of Buddhism. So what I would like you to do is to think about this a little bit. What are the advantages of this type of Buddhism, and why might traditional Buddhists consider this to not be exactly what Buddha had in mind? And given the time here, I think I'm going to come back to Zen Buddhism. But remember that the first articulation of Buddhism in China is this Pure Land form, and very different from what we've seen before, and compelling in a lot of ways, but very, very different. So think about the ways that it's different. Think about the ways that it meets the needs of its followers, and think about the ways in which this is really dividing the Chinese version of Buddhism from the one that exists further to the south in Sri Lanka and in Thailand.